Okay, it's just gone 1 o'clock and I'm very conscious of your time. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Kell Jones from the Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction, and we're here to talk to you today about the Building Passport Alignment Project plans and the progress we've made so far. I've got lots of logos on the page and I'm just going to draw attention to two of them. The Circular Buildings Coalition are the people who funded this stage of our work. We're very grateful to them for that opportunity. And also UCLC, which is UCL Consulting. They are the administrators of the award for us, and they've been fantastic. So if you'd like to work with UCL, they're a great pathway to come through. So today we are going to have a brief introduction to the project and what we've achieved so far and where we want to go. There's a long way to go, but first steps. I'm joined today by Dr. Karim Farghaly and Andrea Charlson. I'd like to invite them to introduce themselves because they're experts in the field rather than me. Karim, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Karim. I'm a lecturer at UCL with Kell, and my work usually is related to digital transformation in the built environment sector. So yeah, thank you for having me, Kell.
Andrea.
Hi, Kell. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Charlson. I've been specialising in sustainability and circularity in the built environment for almost 15 years now, from a consultancy perspective, working client side, and also advising local authorities. And I am now the UK Managing Director for Madaster, bringing the material passport solution to the UK.
Thank you. And we'll hear a lot more from Andrea later on. So I'm just going to dive in with a very quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. My computer keeps up with me. So we'll start off with a discussion or presentation around the background to the Building Passport Alignment Project, the problem that we're trying to solve, and how we're going about solving it. We'll talk about the approach to the work, and then Karim will spend some time talking about the plans and scalability of what we're trying to do. It's a huge task. And then towards the end, Andrea will then speak to us about Madaster's platform and how that can help us with ESG reporting. And then we are very open to Q&A, please. We are finding our way in this process, and we may have some answers, we may not have all the answers though. So any questions you have, please ask and we'll see if we can answer them. If we can't, it'll be a great learning point for us. So without further ado, I will begin and provide you with a bit of an introduction to the project. So my sub-agenda, I'm going to first of all talk a little bit about the problem context. And that's important because this spans disciplines. Typically, I will be speaking to a construction audience, but actually they're the solution. The problem area is finance. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. And then I'll explain what the problem is, and then how building passports can present a solution to that problem. But then how do we, as a research team, how are we trying to align those building passports, and what does that actually try and achieve? So I'll begin with the context. I've been talking about sustainable buildings for probably around the last 20 years. And I've always been pleased to see the existence of things like LEED and BREEAM and all of the other sustainability certifications. But it's only in the last few years that the finance community have become involved in this conversation. And what we're seeing is the emergence of sustainable finance taxonomies around the world. Now, these taxonomies have been introduced to help greenwashing, to help prevent greenwashing, I should say. And they encourage investors to look more closely at the investments they're putting their money towards to make sure that they are producing the right outcomes that they want. And in time, they will operate as a powerful policy tool to steer investment towards sustainable economic activities or assets. Now, the forerunner in this space is the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, and they have described what it means to be a sustainable building. And so if you want to describe your investment in a building or portfolio as sustainable, that needs to have these specific characteristics, which I won't get into because there's lots of detail in there, which is fun. If you're interested in to learn more about that, there's a link at the bottom, which when we share the PDF file of this, you can click onto to get to a report we did in the summer, which explains this a little bit more. But by and large, the sustainable finance taxonomies are a great step forward, because we need finance to effect the transition of the built environment towards a more sustainable footing. Investors want to put their money to do the right thing, some investors, and this provides a way of highlighting those investments that are more sustainable. And what we're seeing is a flow of money towards the more sustainable investment. In the last few months, there's been a threefold move towards the more sustainable investments than the non-sustainable investments. So money is flowing towards those funds. Now, these taxonomies are popping up all over the place, and I apologize for the quality of this image. The EU one isn't highlighted on there, and in the last few days, Hong Kong have announced that they're nearly there on theirs. The UK is constantly deferring theirs, but the key point here is that we have taxonomies emerging in countries and regions, and each country and region are producing their own taxonomy, which will be slightly different. Now, that's not a problem if, for example, and hopefully you can see the building that's just popped up in Colombia, you have a building in Colombia and a bank in Colombia providing the money for that building. The Colombian builders and bankers know the regulations that happen in that country. But what happens if the financing company in Colombia receives money from the EU? And what if that comes from the UK, and ultimately the source of the funds comes from the US? Buildings are very tied geographically, money isn't. And what this means is that the building developer, owner, manager, and the people actually constructing it will need to create a repository of information that satisfies the requirements for Colombia, the EU, the UK, and the US. Now, that's a big burden on the building owner who doesn't know necessarily where the money's coming from. So while welcome, the emergence of all these taxonomies is imposing a greater burden on the building level people. And coming out of COP this week, this quote from an article in the Environmental Finance website: the coexistence of reporting frameworks poses challenges not just for companies who have to adjust their reporting lenses to meet multiple standards, but also for the data providers and the entire data value chain. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with this project, is to integrate and that value chain and get them talking to each other to make sure we all understand each other. So what's the problem we're trying to solve here? The problem is that if you want to call a building sustainable, you need to have a certain amount of information, and then the money can flow towards that investment. But if the investment isn't there, the money won't flow to that investment. In short, it doesn't matter what the performance of the building is. It could be the most sustainable building there is. If you don't have the information to support the analysis that it is sustainable, you won't be able to analyze it as such in your financial statements. And then you start to think, well, if I can't analyze it as sustainable, what's the point of spending that incremental amount to make it perform better than it should, or does rather? So what we're trying to do is to solve this problem by making the information flow, and in turn, the money will flow towards the investments to help us with the transition. With all these taxonomies popping up, we are adding to an oversupply of sustainability reporting, in particular for the real estate sector. And it's not just real estate, sustainability more generally. This environmental finance, again, from a couple of weeks ago, there's talk of a reporting fatigue in sustainability teams. And you can imagine if you have a whole new load of regulations for finance that are just popping up country by country, and you don't even know what those countries are because you don't know where the money's coming from, it's going to become quite a burden on them. And so that's the problem that we're trying to solve here. Now, building passports provide us with a way to capture the information at the building level. And the question we asked ourselves is, are they ready to do that? Most of the building passports are developed what we call bottom up, that is to address a specific problem. We've seen building passports that are focused on materials. We've seen passports focused on renovation, passports focused on energy, all sorts of different things, and they do their own little niche. And there's no guarantee that the information that those passports are capturing will address the reporting requirements of the entire information value chain. That's the problem that we're trying to fix with our building passport alignment project. It starts from the premise that the taxonomies, BREEAM, LEED, are all trying to do broadly the same thing, and that's to define what it means for a building to be sustainable. In that context, we decided, we thought, we hypothesized that actually at the really granular level of data, they should be asking for roughly the same sort of thing. And so what we're doing is we're going through, this is the EU taxonomy, a snappy piece of legislation, and we are identifying the data points, the very specific data points that are required to meet the reporting requirements of the EU taxonomy. We can capture that information and summarize it very succinctly, nice table. And it's really helpful that that then helps us to address one of the requirements of LEED 4.1. That's the idea. We can use information at the building level to solve multiple problems. So with the funding from the Circular Buildings Coalition, we have started the process with 4 reporting regimes, let's call them LEED, BREEAM, the EU taxonomy, and the Sustainable Finance SFDR. I can never remember what the D and the R, directive for reporting directive. And we're taking the materials related sections of those and circular economy related sections, and we're breaking them down into their individual data points. And once we've got those individual data points, we're putting them all into a big pot, and then we're looking for alignment. There might be some slightly differences in the naming of them, but we're just going to try and align them. And what that will lead us to is a standardized ESG material ask that necessarily addresses the challenges of LEED, BREEAM, the EU taxonomy, and the SFDR. Now I'm going to pause for a moment here and pass over to Karim, because he's going to talk a little bit more about the detail of what we're doing, and yeah, some of the more detail on how we are planning to move forward once we've done this limited piece of work.
Thank you very much. Can you please stop sharing so I can share mine? Thank you. Okay, so when Kell came with the problem and we said, okay, let's solve this, I thought it's only data points that we are going to collect and trying to align, but it's actually much bigger than this. The data point does have a building type, which is related to, is it a new building or existing building? What is the requirement? Under each requirement, there are sub-requirements. And what's the intent of the whole requirement? And what's the source of this, like the 4 different things. In the same time, we have this data point is related to what asset, what's the unit of the data point, where would you classify it, and how would you actually capture this data, how it's delivered, what's the deliverable for this data point. So we need to map this to each other. They can't look at them individually in a way or another. So we brought them all together, and we came with the conceptual modeling, which is mapping all the different information that we require to capture to understand very well the alignment. And we find the relationship between them. And then we started capturing this data from all the different platforms. From all the different sources. And the there are a lot. And so far, we are more than 100 requirements and more than 100 data points we capture. The idea of the conceptual modeling or the ontology will help us to scale this, because if we just use it as a SQL or a database, it will not work very well. So we need a bigger thing. And also for the future perspective, we can use this for more supervised learning based on what we capture. So what's next? And what's the bigger picture, if we can say that? So the source, Kell mentioned the four we are looking at, and specifically materials for now, and we captured some data points. This is just very few of them. And the idea is how to align all of the different data points from all the different sources. But what's next? The first thing, we can extend horizontally. So we can also bring other sources in this. And also we can extend horizontally and look at other aspects like water, carbon, waste, and transport. And it will come with other data points, which actually can be aligned with the other ones which we already captured in material and so on. And this will map the horizontal part of the source or the regulation and the standards. But what about the data which are captured or collected already nowadays? So we need also to map this in a vertical aspect. So the first thing we looked at, or we are going to look at, to be honest, users. So who is reporting and for what? And there's material passport and building passport not as much as implemented as I thought in the built environment sector. And there is a lot of initiatives internal in different companies that they have their own template in a way or another. And they say, oh, this is the kind of data sets or data points that they want to collect. We also need to map to existing schemas, starting from IFC industry foundation classes and looking at all the other templates or schemas that we use to capture our data related to sustainability in general. And also we need to map this to existing collection tools or material passports and building passports. And there is some of them exist and we can capture this to them. So it's the link of all of this through the data point aspect. So everything can be linked to each other. If we do this correctly, then we will come with the next problem, which I do believe, which is the data quality of the data sets we are collecting. And this is something next to think about. So yes, that's me. Thank you, Kell.
Thanks, Karim. I'm just going to go back to my slide deck if that's okay. And there we go. Skip through Karim's slides, which were there as a backup. So thanks for that, Karim. So this is not a small task, and we have taken the first steps on that journey in the last few months. Going forward, what we're hoping to do is to extend the work in the material space to cover other taxonomies, to cover other national and international reporting schemes. That's one part of what we're trying to do. We're also hoping to pilot and test the work that we've already done over the next 6 months. And to do that, what we're hoping for is to be joined by standard setters, policymakers, passport developers, and property finance professionals in a community of practice who can test to see whether actually what we're trying to do does what we think it should do. And so we'll be reaching out to people in these sectors and asking them if they'd be interested in taking part in our pilots and testing. We've set up a LinkedIn community recently. You can get to it through the QR code there. But I think one of the other things that we've not really touched on is the sort of the bigger vision. Ultimately, what we want to see is seamless reporting from the building level to whoever needs the information about the building. And that requires this data set, this data structure rather. And ultimately, we then can use that structured data set to inform policy. So if somebody's thinking of a new policy, are they asking for something that's in this data set or not? If they are asking for something new, how are they going to go about that? You can also envisage using the data structure to say, is this information available in a country by country basis? Are there policy measures that we need to implement to get that information out of its little silo to the finance community to allow the taxonomy regulations to work? And the third area, which is the sort of nirvana of this for me, is some sort of open data process to allow this information to travel seamlessly to where it needs to go. So that's the vision, that's the future, and these are the first steps we're taking. Now, we had a workshop earlier this year, so a few weeks ago, and we engaged with around about 20 people in this space, and they've provided some really helpful feedback, provided us with some interesting challenges that we're trying to address, not least around qualitative information. How are we going to deal with that? So we're starting to wrestle with those problems now. The other thing that we'd like to be doing over the next 6 to 8 months is growing our community of practice. We're physically based in the UK, and so our connections are typically in this space, but what we want to do is to branch out to Europe, to America, to Africa, and to Asia. And we're hoping to have events, similar workshops across those regions over the next few months, funding permitting. So that's the dream, that's the picture, that's how we're going to go about it. We are hoping that once we have a default a specification in place for the materials, we will be releasing that as a sort of draft specification with a view to getting that become as a standard through the BSI and a flex standard, and then making that publicly available. The hope then is that other standard setters can review that against their existing requirements and add to it. So we're not looking to do all of this work ourselves. We're looking to create the community to crowdsource effectively this data structure. That's why having the community is so very important to us. Anyway, I can talk about this for several hours, and so rather than deferring you any longer, I'm going to pass over to Andrea, who will give us a bit of an introduction to Madaster and how that works, and if you're not familiar with building passports, how they can help with reporting needs.
Thanks, Kell. Try and get this up efficiently. All good?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for those intro presentations. I think it's really interesting how you're talking about the open sharing of data and all the data sets that are needed, and that's kind of what I'm going to hopefully touch on a bit throughout my presentation. And so, as we have been hearing, reporting on the environmental impacts of built assets is becoming increasingly necessary, increasingly requested, and there's a whole range of reasons, as Kell and Karim outlined, about where those requirements are coming from. Here in London, we have a planning requirement, which is asking for more information about the materials within buildings. There's a strong market demand at the moment for enhanced sustainability credentials of buildings, and that's spanning out not just in terms of energy performance, but also in terms of the materials that you used, where they've come from, where they could be going to in the future. And sometimes that is encompassed through the requirement through different certifications, such as BREEAM and LEED. And increasingly, there's this requirement for reporting, for corporate reporting, and whether that's through the formal kind of financial mechanisms, as Kell described, or even just through an organization's own individual strategy and ambitions, and wanting to be able to report against them to their external stakeholders. So there's lots and lots of demands for different types of environmental reporting from buildings and infrastructure assets. And as well as that being a challenge in itself, the challenge that Kell and the team are trying to address, the other challenge is that the data needed to facilitate all of that reporting is really fragmented, because buildings that are not one thing, they are really complex assemblies of thousands of products and materials put together by numerous different tradespeople on site. And so that means even if the data kind of is available at some point, collating it all, cascading it through the supply chain from the people who've created it to the people who actually need it and want it, it can be very challenging, and where it is possible, it can be really time consuming. And this was highlighted in a recent report from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, who said that for years, the lack of data collection, storage and sharing has been a barrier to ensuring efficient modern construction and real estate. And where this data is unavailable, it affects decision-making about the social, environmental and economic performance of buildings and contributes to a continuing lack of transparency. And so it's this lack of transparency and fragmentation of the data is one of the things that we're trying to address through Madaster. So Madaster is a material cadaster, or in other words, an online digital registry of the materials and products that go into buildings and other assets. So we're trying to enable that transparent transfer of data from those who originally create it to those who want to use it, and whether that's to inform decision making or to inform reporting or for any other reason. And the way we do that is by starting at the source. So everything that we do within our platform starts by recording detailed information on each product or material. So where the information is available, we can capture what the product is, who made it, where it was made, its environmental impact, its circularity attributes, and anything else that's useful to know about that product that's for the supply chain going forward. So that could be other certifications, technical specifications, warranties, cleaning and maintenance schedules, etc. And within the platform, we have this information available already on a generic level for over 300 of the most commonly used materials in construction. So that can be quite a good start for people just setting out on this journey and not having much information on where their materials and products are coming from. However, what we really recommend best practice is that manufacturers themselves provide the specific information for their own products and make that available to everyone else who's using the platform, which then starts this cascade of information all the way through from them through to the people who want to use it at the end. So what we then do with this detailed information on each product is combine it to create a full record of the materials and products within an asset. The way that we do this, we try to automate this process. This is one of the things that can be quite lengthy and time consuming if you don't have a digitized way of doing it. So we extract material quantities from the design and construction process. One of the most efficient ways that we can do that is through taking the information that's contained in a building information model, whether that's a design model or an as constructed model, which are becoming more and more commonplace across the industry. So we can take information directly from that, or we can accept information in different ways through uploading information via Excel or through integrations with other software systems. And then we have a matching system which will automatically match what the bill of quantities says, wherever that's come from, to one of the detailed data sets that's within our database, and puts it all together to create the passport or the register for that building. Once we do that, we can then start to generate a whole range of insights on both the materials themselves and, more importantly, how they are then combined together into the asset itself. So we can generate insights on the circularity of materials, and that can look at both where those materials have come from. Are they already reused? Are they already recycled? Are they renewable, for example? And also, what's their potential future life? Where could they go next? So we call that the output. So are they available for reuse? Can they be available for recycling? Or are they more likely to go into incineration or landfill? And you can see there's a lot of different KPIs captured into that level of insight. We can also generate insights on anything that's captured within an environmental product declaration for a product. So, for example, looking at the whole life carbon of an asset. And we can do that for water use, toxicity, any of the KPIs that we can capture in a product data set, we can then present at a building level. And what this means is that we can then generate the KPIs that are required for the whole building, which can then be used to support the building level reporting against those requirements I mentioned at the beginning. So whether it's a requirement from BREEAM, for example, or whether it's a requirement from LEED, we can produce the outputs to support that process. But what we do in the platform as well is we try to take it one step further. So because it's a platform-based system, we can then aggregate all of those assets into a larger portfolio, and whether that's a portfolio based on a company, an organization, or whether it's a portfolio based on a geographical region, we can then aggregate all of the insights that have been generated to that level. And then this can then start to support the organizational reporting, and whether that's for, moving on to things like the taxonomy and stuff like that. We have also started to build in specific additional features which can support the reporting and decision making across a whole portfolio of buildings. So the first thing that we've already implemented is the CREM tool. So this can help identify assets that are at risk of becoming stranded from an operational energy perspective. And we're currently exploring how we can provide additional insights based on the data that we already collect to support other either reporting or decision-making requirements. The EU taxonomy being the one that we are most actively working on at the moment. And this is one of the main reasons we're interested in the UCL project, so that we can make sure that we're capturing that data all the way from the source if it's going to be needed eventually for reporting against something like the EU taxonomy. So I guess in summary, we're aiming to provide a central, easily accessible source of information for the entire construction chain. We want it to be something that everyone can engage with, contribute to and access, to making sure that they get the information that they need when they need it. And whether that's from the producer of the product or material at almost the beginning of that supply chain, through to those involved in the design and delivery of assets, and then finally to the eventual end owner of the building. Ultimately, getting the right data to the right stakeholders at the right stages of decision making. I hope that's been an interesting overview and introduction to our platform. If you'd like to find out more, please do feel free to reach out to me directly, or the QR code here takes you to our website where you can start to find out a bit more. Thank you. Back to you, Cal.
Thanks, Andrea. Are you happy to share the slides that you've presented?
I am, yes.
Perfect, thank you. I'll make sure those are available for people. So we've sort of ended the sort of formal presentation part of this, and I'd encourage you to add some Q&As into the box. I can see there's a couple there, and I'll come back to those in a second. But I'd just like to ask you, Andrea, before we dive into those, what you touched on the value of the work that we're doing. could you maybe speak a little bit more about how you would use what we're doing in your world?
How we would use what you're doing. I think there's kind of, I mean, the first answer to that is, at the moment, there isn't really very much standardization in the material passport world at all. And there's a lot of interest in it for the reasons we've spoken about today, but also there's kind of quite a lot of other drivers as well. But our concern is that without this standardization, there could be a reluctance or a reticence for anyone to engage with a material passport platform because of it, for the risk of it not being interoperable with a future platform they may want to transfer to at some future point. So I think there's that kind of, if we can all agree what information is useful to collect and collate at what level and the mechanisms for doing that, that then removes the risk for anyone trying to adopt a material passporting solution. Because if they know that it does that and that they all do that, and then you're just kind of, you're just choosing the one that works best with your systems and processes rather than, one than being completely different products at the end, which is not going to be helpful in the long run.
Okay. And can you see a time when building passports become mandatory?
I think it's possible. I think we're probably some way off that yet. I think at the moment we're seeing quite a big interest because of all of the other benefits that people can see from having access to this information, whether it's that informed decision making or it's de-risking their portfolio because they know a lot more about it, and because it can make some of this collation easier and quicker. I think we are probably on a trajectory to them becoming mandated. In the UK, we already have, operations and maintenance manuals, and the Building Safety Act is kind of emphasising certain elements of that. And, there's the EU legislation on digital product passports. So I think there's definitely momentum that way. Just kind of how long it's going to take.
Thanks. I think you've also mentioned interoperability there. I think that's one of the other key things that was started pushing this agenda for us, is that if you want to get information out of your system versus somebody else's system, and you're a finance person, you're going to have to do some sort of decoding of what's going on between those two systems. So one of the aspirations for this program is to give that sort of translation tool so that what comes out of Madaster comes out of ORM's software and all the other different passports. And so we're trying to create a common language that allows that interoperability and that flow of information. Thank you.
And I think the other thing that's really interesting about the alignment project as well is kind of the theory that you stated at the beginning, that if everyone's trying to do the same thing, probably it's the same data that's needed. Whereas I think most tools at the moment, you need to say, right, I'm trying to achieve this aim, and then everything's structured based on that aim. And that's not how our tool's set up. Our tool, because it's all like that bottom up, but then there's that middle bit of which bits do you point in which direction to get whichever certification or reporting standard you're trying to support.
And that's once we've got this definition of a data set, we can actually say, okay, click a switch, you want to do BREEAM, okay, you need these pieces of data, definitely. That's really helpful. So I'm going to turn very briefly to the questions. There's one that I'm going to respond to, but there's one for you, I think, Andrea. It's come from Richard Boyd, and he's asking, what levers will drive the adoption of this standard after it's published? Now, it's officially to me, but I think actually you might be able to answer that more effectively.
Levers will drive the adoption of the standard after it's published. I think there's probably three levers. I think the policy lever is quite strong. I think it's almost always the lever of last resort, because it's kind of sweeping up the people who've not engaged for any other reason. But that is still quite a significant part of the industry, which is so very cost driven. I think at the moment it's going to be the market in two different ways. So the market both kind of top down from investment, which I think is where your kind of research angle has come from, but also, as I briefly mentioned in my presentation, the market, I mean, it will vary across Europe significantly, but in London at the moment, the commercial sector is really competing very heavily, and sustainability is one of the things that the development community is trying to use as differentiator. So I think having that standard that they can refer to, that's kind of saying, reduces their risk of saying, I want something in isolation, where if they can say it's an agreed thing, we want that thing that everyone's agreed to. So that's, I think the market will be one of the main initial drivers for adopting the standard.
Thank you. And I'll add a little sort of PS to that. The way we see these things evolving is that creating a sort of standard specification, and the BSI have kindly engaged with the program to help us move towards that, act as a sort of focal point. And we're hoping that having that focal point will encourage the building passport developers to start aligning with that, because they know that it will be able to answer the questions asked of it, of those 4 reporting requirements. And so the sort of norm development process, by having that standard specification, ultimately and this is my dreaming ambitions again, ultimately moving towards a formal standard. And could you imagine an ISO related to ESG reporting for the built environment? I can. That would be a great end goal, but we're taking it one step at a time. So yeah, I see the standard acting as a convening thing, which is open for discussion and change as well.
Yeah.
Karim, hopefully you're still with us. I was going to ask you if you wanted to talk a little bit about how that sort of extension of the work was going to physically work, because it goes outside of my technical area.
Just we are learning from what we have done. I would say not the best way ever in the BIM world, and we will try to do it in a better way here. So we have IFC as the format of change that should be everyone using. People are providing it as one extension deliverable, and they don't go back to it. But if we ensure that we start from the top-down approach, and as you said, that all the material passport will say, oh, we are compatible with this, like all the software providers will say, oh, we are compatible with this ISO or this specification, I believe it could work much, much better, and it will help. It would be a requirement. So I want my data points to be aligned to X ISO -X in a way or not.
And we've talked previously about how the specification needs to be extensible to capture other requirements from other standards that we haven't looked at yet. Is that something you could spend a couple of moments talking about?
Yes. So the idea is we build the classes which we can add any kind of instance to it. So whatever coming from any different source, we can add it to the pool of data sets. And then we can say that this data set, the new one, is aligned to this one, and this one is aligned to this one. And all of them will be aligned to one data set, which can be queryable very easily. So if I want to say what data points I need to align to do lead, for example, it will provide you, rather than the 1,000, it will provide you 50. And you can also, if we do it 2 ways, from source perspective and passport or data collection perspective, it could recommend which tool is the best way for you, for your purpose, in a way or another. So each tool, what are they providing and what are the data sets already existing there. So as a scalable perspective, because what we're trying to do here as an ontology or a conceptual model, everyone can add an input to this. And this is what we will share with everyone, hopefully after we finish the first exercise.
Thank you. And I think it's important to say that we're not going to be doing all the work, and we want to crowdsource this. And we've talked about making it available on GitHub as a sort of pilot testing thing. That's all to be decided. But that does go to the other question that we've been asked from Hugh. Hi, Hugh. Asking if we've spoken to the World Bank about EDGE. I'm aware of EDGE and its importance in developing economies from my time at Climate Bonds, actually. We haven't made that connection yet. We started to talk with the four that we've got on the assumption that they would provide us with a really good solid chunk of data sets that we need to get the ball rolling. I don't currently have a connection at the World Bank and would welcome one. So if you're able to make that connection, that would be great. Thank you for the question. Does anybody else have any other questions for us? Seemingly not. I'm going to share my screen one last time with a view to, oh, there was another question just popping up. Oh, that was from you saying thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen one last time to give you the opportunity to scan the QR code for our community of practice. We'd love to have you on board for information, testing, piloting, and just keeping abreast of what we're up to. I'd like to say thank you to Andrea for joining us today and for Karim for his work and helping me understand what ontology is. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the 10 minutes you have left of the hour. Thanks all for your time. Take care.